I want to talk about living donors. Recently, the National Kidney Registry expanded its Donor Shield program by increasing the maximum reimbursement that a living donor can receive from $5,000 to $6,000 per donor. So here to explain what exactly that means, what this covers, is Chief Strategy Officer of National Kidney Registry and Living Donor, Michael Lalo. Thanks for joining me this morning, Michael.
Good morning, Haley. Thank you for having me.
So if you could help me explain to people, what is the Donor Shield program and what does this reimbursement mean? I mean, people aren't allowed to get paid for a kidney, but they're allowed to get paid for costs that it might take to be a living donor, correct?
Absolutely. So the Donor Shield program was created to remove disincentives for living donors to donate. And I think it's arguably the best support and protection out there for living donors. And I know you mentioned that we raised the cap, which was just from, that's what you mentioned, is just on our travel, which was $5,000. Now it includes travel, dependent care, and meals, which we raised to $6,000. But we also are able to reimburse for lost wages, and that's a maximum of $12,000. So altogether, if someone needed, the full financial support, that's $18,000 that a donor would be able to be reimbursed for.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're basically hoping that more people would be willing to be living donors, which is very much needed for kidney transplants. But you're hoping that more people will be living donors because they can get reimbursed for what it might take to be off of your job or what it might take to have childcare during your recovery after a surgery like this. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. So I've had the pleasure of mentoring many donors, through the process. And the top concerns is I can't take time off of work. And, which is crazy, right? Someone's stepping forward to try and change or save someone's life, and they can't afford to do it. So we offer, $2,000 a week for up to 6 weeks, which is typically more than enough for a donor to be reimbursed. And the other, disincentive that was there is travel. Well, maybe they need to go to the transplant center where the patient's at, although with the National Kidney Registry, that's absolutely not necessary. But if the circumstances are such that they have to travel, well, now they can get reimbursed for that up to $6,000.
And you're being a little modest by saying that you mentor other people, because I know that you yourself, you are a former NYPD detective, and in 2018 you decided to become a living donor. Can you explain a little bit about why you chose to make that decision?
You do good research over there. Yes, that is true. Back in 2018, I was sitting at my desk in April, and there was a police officer who needed a kidney. I attempted to help him. I didn't really know much about kidney donation at the time. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. And then about a few months later, sitting at that same desk, I was looking at a newspaper article, and there was a gentleman named Mark Weiner who had a billboard donated to him in Times Square, and he asked, for someone to step forward. So I didn't hear any voices or anything like that, but I did think it was odd. I was alive for 46 years, didn't know anything about kidney donation, and now twice in 4 months. So I looked into donating to him. I wasn't familiar with the NKR at the time, so they tested me to be a match. And when they told me that I wasn't a match, I asked them, well, I learned about this thing through my research in Google about donating to a stranger, being it's called a Good Samaritan donor or a non-directed donor. Can I do that? And of course, the transplant center said yes. And that same year in December, I donated a kidney at the time to a stranger who I've since met.
Wow, what a beautiful story. I won't go too much into my personal story, but thank you for what you did. You are definitely an angel on earth, according to me. Who else can be a living kidney donor? If somebody here is listening and thinks, oh, that sounds interesting, how could they go and become a living donor?
So the answer is anyone could possibly be a living kidney donor if they're healthy. The transplant centers do a phenomenal job. You're going to have the best medical testing that you would ever go through, because you're walking in there a healthy person, right, with 2 kidneys, and you're leaving the hospital. They want you to leave the same, healthy, just minus the 1 kidney. So if anyone is interested in becoming a living donor, they can go to our website, nkr.org, and there's a ton of great information there. They can also get partnered up with a mentor, someone like me who's donated in the past, to help guide them through the process and tell them what the process is like.
And, a lot of people are just going to immediately write this off because it requires surgery. And so people don't want to volunteer for a surgery. Can you explain what the recovery was like for you?
Sure. Well, interestingly, I don't like my blood being taken, and I've fainted when that has happened. I have never had a surgery in my entire life except for the kidney surgery. So if I could do it, I say, anyone listening to could do it. But the recovery, honestly, most transplant centers, you're in the hospital for 1-2 nights at most, as long as there's no reason for you to stay any longer than that. You go home. I got 6 weeks off of work because of my job. I wasn't allowed to lift more than 20 pounds for 6 weeks. And as a detective, there is a possibility where you might have to do something where you have to lift more than 20 pounds. So they kept me out for the full 6 weeks. But if you had a desk job, if you didn't have anything that was heavy lifting, you could, of course, your transplant team would be the ones to put you back to work. But typically anywhere from 2.5, maximum of 3 weeks, you could be back at work.
And now, thanks to Donor Shield, maybe more people will consider it because they can get reimbursed for lost wages, for childcare, for travel, anything that it might take to become a living donor. So
absolutely.
Yeah, Michael Lalo, you are a fantastic person. Thank you for joining me this morning. That was all wonderful information. I appreciate it.